The glass doors of the luxury car dealership slid open with a soft hiss, releasing a wave of cool air and the scent of polished leather. Inside, rows of gleaming machines stood proudly under spotlights. Sleek Ferraris, powerful Lamborghinis, and custom Bentleys that whispered wealth and prestige. Customers in designer suits and glittering jewelry strolled through the showroom, their conversations buzzing with status and price tags. And then quietly, Manny Pacquiao walked in. He wasn't wearing anything flashy, just a simple polo shirt, jeans, and sneakers. His wife Jinky walked beside him, carrying her small purse, her elegance effortless but understated. To anyone who didn't know, they looked like an ordinary couple, maybe curious tourists passing through. There was no entourage, no press, no flashing cameras, just Manny, Jinky, and their shared smile as they admired the showroom's beauty. Behind a polished counter, a young saleswoman noticed them enter. She glanced up, her eyes narrowing slightly as she took in their simple clothes. Without much thought, she returned her attention to another customer, a tall man in a tailored suit, assuming he was the one more likely to close a sale. Manny and Jinky slowly approached a stunning black Ferrari. Manny's eyes lingered on the curves of the car, the engineering precision, the shine that spoke of power and speed. He whispered something to Jinky, who laughed softly, her hand brushing against his. Finally, Manny turned and approached the saleswoman politely. "Excuse me," he said with his gentle voice. "Could you tell me more about this model?" The saleswoman plastered on a polite smile, but her tone carried a faint edge of dismissal. "Sir, those cars are extremely expensive. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable looking at our pre-owned section. It's just around the corner." Jinky's smile faltered. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment as a couple of nearby customers overheard and exchanged amused looks. Manny, however, didn't lose his composure. He simply nodded, his lips curling into a calm, almost knowing smile. "Thank you," he said softly, stepping back to take another look at the Ferrari. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. But in that silence, in that patience, there was something brewing, a storm no one in that dealership was prepared for. Have you ever been judged unfairly just by the way you looked? Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. And remember, sometimes the quietest people carry the loudest surprises. The tension in the dealership was subtle, but it stung. Jinky tugged gently at Manny's sleeve, whispering, "Let's just go. Maybe she doesn't know who you are." Manny shook his head, his smile never fading. "It's okay," he said softly. "Sometimes people see only what they want to see." Meanwhile, the saleswoman turned her full attention back to the suited man she had been entertaining earlier. She laughed a little too loudly at his joke, showing him brochures, pointing out custom features, and walking him through the financing options. Her enthusiasm was almost theatrical, a stark contrast to the cold tone she'd used with Manny just minutes ago. Manny and Jinky wandered on their own, admiring the luxury cars without assistance. Manny bent down to peek into the interior of a bright red Lamborghini Aventador, running his hand lightly along its frame. Jinky followed, but her eyes betrayed her discomfort. Every now and then she caught people staring, not at the cars, but at them. Some customers whispered, clearly entertained by the ordinary-looking couple being ignored in such an opulent place. One man chuckled as he passed by. "Doesn't seem like their type of showroom," he murmured to his wife, loud enough for Jinky to hear. The sting of humiliation deepened. Still, Manny remained composed. He had faced tougher arenas than this. Championship fights, grueling political battles, the judgment of millions. A saleswoman's dismissal couldn't shake him, but Jinky knew her husband well. She recognized the glint in his eye, the one that meant he was letting the moment unfold, waiting for the right time to act. At that very moment, another sales associate, an older man with a warm smile, noticed the couple. He approached politely. "Good afternoon. Are you folks interested in any of our models today?" His tone was respectful, without judgment. Before Manny could answer, the young saleswoman swooped in, irritation flashing in her eyes. "Don't waste your time," she said under her breath, but loud enough for both Manny and Jinky to hear. "They're just browsing. They can't afford these models." The older associate blinked in surprise, Clearly embarrassed by his colleague's words, Jinky's face flushed again, her hands tightening on her purse strap. But Manny simply chuckled. His laugh was low, almost amused. He turned to the older salesman and nodded. "Actually," Manny said calmly, "we'd like to take a closer look at this Ferrari, if you don't mind showing us." The older associate's face brightened. "Of course, sir. It would be my pleasure." He motioned toward the sleek black Ferrari. This particular model is one of our most exclusive, with a top speed that can outpace nearly anything on the road. As the associate spoke passionately, Manny listened intently, asking thoughtful questions. He wasn't trying to prove anything, not yet. But every word, every glance he exchanged with Jinky carried an unspoken weight. The young saleswoman, still standing nearby, rolled her eyes and muttered something about wasting resources. What she didn't realize was that other customers were now paying attention, not just to the cars, but to her dismissive behavior. What Manny would do next was about to turn the entire dealership upside down. If you've ever been underestimated or dismissed unfairly, drop A in the comments. We're reading them all. And hey, if you're enjoying this story, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. The older associate led Manny and Jinky toward the sleek midnight black Ferrari. Its curves gleamed under the bright showroom lights, and the car seemed to command attention even without an engine's roar. Manny ran his hand along the hood, gently, like a man appreciating a masterpiece rather than a possession. "This is one of our most powerful models," the associate explained with genuine enthusiasm. "Handcrafted interior, twin-turbo engine, acceleration from 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds. Very few people get the chance to own one." Manny nodded, asking simple but pointed questions about maintenance, performance, and customization. His calm, thoughtful interest stood in sharp contrast to the dismissive laughter coming from the young saleswoman across the room. She was still hovering nearby, pretending to shuffle brochures but clearly eavesdropping. Every so often she shot a smug glance their way as if silently saying, "Why are you wasting everyone's time?" Jinky shifted uncomfortably. She whispered, "Manny, maybe we really should go. This isn't worth it." But Manny shook his head, smiling. "Patience," he murmured. "Sometimes people reveal themselves without us saying a word." As the associate opened the Ferrari door for Manny to sit inside, a small group of customers gathered at a distance. Some had begun whispering, puzzled by the man's calm presence. He didn't look like the stereotypical billionaire customer, no gold watches or flashy designer suits. Yet, there was something about his confidence, quiet, unwavering, that drew attention. When Manny slid into the driver's seat, the older salesman grinned. "You fit in that seat perfectly, sir, like it was designed for you." Manny chuckled. "It feels comfortable." And then, casually, he asked, "If I wanted to pay cash for this vehicle, how soon could it be delivered?" The words landed like thunder in the room. The associate's eyes widened. "Cash, sir? Well, immediate delivery would be possible, of course." The young saleswoman, overhearing this, laughed loudly, a sharp, sarcastic laugh. "Cash? Are you serious? Sir, with all due respect, this car costs more than some people's houses. You can't just walk in here and buy it outright." Her tone dripped with condescension. A couple nearby customers frowned at her arrogance. One whispered, "She doesn't know who that is, does she?" Manny looked at the saleswoman, his face calm but his eyes steady. "And what makes you so certain?" she smirked. "Because I know the type. People like you walk in to look, to touch, maybe even to dream. But buyers, they look different. They don't show up in plain clothes with no assistant, no appointment." The arrogance in her voice made Jinky's face burn with anger. She wanted to respond, but Manny gently placed a hand on her arm, his signal to let him handle it. The older salesman looked horrified. "Please forgive her, sir. That is not how we treat our customers." Manny smiled politely. "No offense taken. Everyone has their own way of seeing the world." But what he said next made the entire showroom go quiet. Still, "Perhaps it is time for me to show you who I really am." The young saleswoman raised an eyebrow. "Oh? And who might that be?" At that moment, one of the customers in the crowd gasped. He recognized Manny instantly and blurted out, "Wait, isn't that Manny Pacquiao, the senator? The world champion boxer?" Heads turned. Phones came out. The whisper spread like wildfire across the showroom. "Manny Pacquiao? No way, that's him." "The boxing legend?" The young saleswoman's smirk froze, her eyes widening in shock. She glanced between Manny, the crowd, and the older salesman, realizing with dawning horror that she had dismissed and insulted one of the most respected men in the world. Manny stood slowly, his presence now towering though his voice remained calm. "Yes," he said simply. "My name is Manny Pacquiao." And in that instant, the balance of the room shifted entirely. Have you ever seen someone judged by their appearance only for the truth to shock everyone? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your experiences. And don't forget to like this video if you're still with us, because what happens next is going to leave you speechless. The showroom was no longer buzzing with casual chatter. It was electric, alive with murmurs, camera clicks, and astonished whispers. The realization that Manny Pacquiao, the boxing legend, the philanthropist, the senator, was standing right there shifted the entire atmosphere. The older salesman straightened his posture, visibly proud now to be the one assisting Manny. Meanwhile, the young saleswoman's face drained of color. The smug smirk that had lingered on her lips only moments ago was gone, replaced by panic. She stammered, "Sir, I didn't mean to, I didn't realize," but Manny didn't look at her. His gaze was steady, scanning the Ferrari as though weighing something far greater than horsepower and design. For him, this was no longer just about buying a car. It had become a test of patience, dignity, and the power of humility. Jinky leaned toward him. "You've proven your point. Manny, let's just leave." But Manny shook his head softly. "Not yet." The older salesman cleared his throat, eager to restore order. "Mr. Pacquiao, if you'd like, we can arrange a private room for you to discuss options, away from distractions." He shot a sharp look at the young woman, but Manny raised a hand. "No need. This moment belongs right here." He turned slowly, his voice calm but carrying a weight that silenced the entire floor. "All my life, people have looked at me and seen only what they wanted to see. A poor boy from the province, too small, too weak, too uneducated to stand among champions. I know what it feels like to be judged before you are even given a chance." The crowd listened, enraptured. He looked directly at the young saleswoman now, her head lowered, shame burning in her cheeks. "You saw me walk in and decided I wasn't worth your time. You believed wealth is only found in fancy suits and loud gestures. But let me tell you something." He stepped closer, his voice steady. "True worth is not carried in clothes, or cars, or watches. It is carried in the choices we make, the respect we show, and the lives we touch." The words cut deeper than any rebuke. The young woman bit her lip, fighting tears. Manny turned back to the Ferrari, then looked at the older salesman. "Sir, you treated me with kindness from the start. That speaks more about you than anything else." The older man bowed his head humbly. "Thank you, Mr. Pacquiao. It's an honor." The young woman suddenly stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Mr. Pacquiao, please. I didn't mean to disrespect you. I was wrong. I judged you unfairly. Please forgive me." All eyes were on Manny. What would he do? Would he lash out? Would he humiliate her the way she had humiliated him? He studied her for a long moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, he smiled. "I forgive you," he said gently. But forgiveness doesn't erase the lesson. Remember this day every time you meet someone new. Treat every person with dignity, no matter who they are. Because you never know who is standing in front of you. The saleswoman's eyes filled with tears. She nodded, unable to speak. The crowd burst into applause. Not for the Ferrari, not for the dealership, but for Manny's grace. Then, almost casually, Manny looked at the older salesman again. "I'll take it, the Ferrari, cash, but only if you personally handle the sale." The older man nearly stumbled, overwhelmed. Yes, of course. Thank you, sir." Phones captured every moment. Manny's humility, the saleswoman's shame, and the shocking twist of a man buying a Ferrari outright after being dismissed as a nobody. And yet, for Manny, it wasn't about the car. It was about showing the world, and that young woman, that dignity, patience, and respect are more powerful than arrogance. As he and Jinky walked out of the showroom, the crowd parted for them like royalty. Some whispered, some clapped, some even called out blessings. The young saleswoman remained frozen by the counter, watching them leave, her heart heavy but changed. Manny didn't look back. He didn't need to. The lesson had already been written in her memory forever. If you were in Manny's place, what would you have done? Walked away or forgiven? Tell us in the comments below. Your answers might surprise others too. And if you're inspired by Manny's grace, don't forget to hit the like button. We still have more twists coming, so keep watching until the end. The roar of the Ferrari's engine echoed in the streets as Manny and Jinky drove away, leaving, the dealership buzzing like a shaken beehive. But inside, the story was only just beginning to spread. Within minutes, several customers had already uploaded clips of the incident to social media. The video thumbnails told the story before the captions did. Saleswoman ignores Manny Pacquiao. Big mistake. And Pacquiao humiliates luxury car dealership with classy response. By the next morning, the video had gone viral. Millions of people watched the footage of Manny calmly addressing the young saleswoman, forgiving her, and then buying the Ferrari in cash. Comment sections exploded with admiration. This is why he's a legend. Not just in the ring, but in life. Humility beats arrogance every time. That saleswoman just got a life lesson she'll never forget. Meanwhile, inside the dealership, the atmosphere was heavy with tension. The manager had called an emergency staff meeting. The young saleswoman sat in silence, her eyes downcast, while the older salesman stood quietly in the corner, almost embarrassed at the sudden spotlight on him. The manager's voice was stern. "Do you all realize what happened yesterday? Do you understand how much damage this could have done to our brand? Manny Pacquiao is one of the most respected athletes and public figures in the world, and instead of treating him with the dignity he deserves, we insulted him in our own showroom." He pointed directly at the young woman. I hope you've learned something." She swallowed hard, her voice trembling. I judged him by his appearance. I thought he wasn't serious about buying. I was wrong. I was so wrong." The manager sighed. "This isn't just about Manny Pacquiao. It's about every person who walks through that door. You don't know their story. You don't know their struggle. You don't know what they've achieved. Every customer deserves respect, whether they're buying a Ferrari or just looking." The older salesman finally spoke up, his voice calm but firm. "With all due respect, sir, Mr. Pacquiao didn't just teach her a lesson. He reminded all of us why respect must always come first." The room fell silent. Even the manager nodded slowly. "You're right. And let this be a turning point for us all." Later that afternoon, the young saleswoman sat alone in the employee lounge. Her mind replayed Manny's words over and over. Remember this day every time you meet someone new. She thought about the way she had dismissed him, the way she had assumed so much based on so little. And she thought about the way he had responded, not with anger, not with humiliation, but with forgiveness. Tears welled up in her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt something shift deep inside her. At that very moment, her phone buzzed, a notification, the viral video. She clicked on it, watching herself on screen as the world saw her at her worst. The shame stung, but she kept watching until Manny's calm, steady words played again. By the time the video ended, she whispered to herself, "I'll be better. I promise." Meanwhile, Manny sat in his home, completely unfazed by the social media storm. For him, it wasn't about going viral. It wasn't about proving anything. It was simply about living by the principles he had always believed in: respect, humility, and kindness. But Jinky noticed the way he smiled softly when he read a few of the online comments. She leaned closer and teased, "So, you're a viral sensation again." This time without throwing a single punch. Manny chuckled. Sometimes the strongest punches aren't thrown in the ring. The couple shared a laugh, but Manny's heart remained heavy with reflection. He thought of all the people out there who were judged unfairly every day, people who didn't have the chance to prove themselves. He knew his story was bigger than himself. By the end of the week, the dealership incident wasn't just a viral clip. It had become a talking point across mainstream media. Morning shows replayed the video, commentators praised Manny's humility, and news outlets wrote headlines like, "Manny Pacquiao teaches luxury dealership the true value of respect." From boxing ring to life lessons, Pacquiao's viral encounter. The dealership's phone lines were flooded. Some people called to voice their disappointment, others to say they'd never buy from a place that treated customers so poorly. A few even walked into the showroom just to mock the staff. Careful, you don't want to ignore another legend. The manager knew something had to change. He called Manny personally. "Mr. Pacquiao, I want to apologize again, not just as a manager, but as a man. That day, we failed to uphold the respect every person deserves. You've shown us more grace than we deserved." Manny's voice was calm, steady. "I appreciate your apology. What matters now is that it doesn't happen again. To anyone." The manager nodded, even though Manny couldn't see him. "We've decided to hold mandatory training for all employees, not just about customer service, but about humility. Your example will be part of it if you don't mind." Manny chuckled softly. "If my story helps even one person, I don't mind at all." Meanwhile, the young saleswoman couldn't escape the weight of her mistake. Everywhere she went, people recognized her as the woman who ignored Manny Pacquiao. At first, it felt unbearable. But as she read through the comments online, she noticed something. Not all of them were cruel. One said, "I was once like her, judging people too quickly. Manny's response taught me to slow down." Another wrote, "We've all made mistakes. What matters is whether she changes after this." She realized that while her error had been public, her growth could be too. Instead of hiding, she decided to embrace the lesson. The following weekend, she attended the dealership's first training session. The manager asked her to stand up and share her experience. Nervous but determined, she spoke. "I misjudged a man because of the way he looked. That man turned out to be one of the most respected people in the world. But what embarrassed me most wasn't his fame. It was how kind he was when he could have humiliated me. He showed me more respect than I gave him. I don't ever want to forget that." The room fell silent. Some employees nodded, others shifted uncomfortably, but all of them listened. When she sat back down, a coworker whispered, "That took guts. Respect." For the first time since the incident, she smiled. At home, Manny sat with his daughter watching the news coverage. She turned to him and asked, "Papa, why didn't you just walk away angry? You had every right." Manny placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Because anger doesn't change people, but kindness, sometimes it does." The girl thought about that for a moment, her young face serious. Then she grinned. "So kindness is stronger than a punch?" Manny laughed. "In some battles, yes. In the most important ones, always. If you believe kindness has more power than anger, type respect, because in the final part, you'll see how Manny's small act of humility created an impact no one expected." In the weeks that followed, the story of Manny Pacquiao at the luxury car dealership transformed from a viral headline into a global lesson. It wasn't just about one man being ignored. It was about how people treat each other when they think no one is watching. The dealership had no choice but to adapt. New posters went up in the showroom. Every guest deserves respect, no exceptions. The sales staff, once known for their stiff formality, now greeted everyone with warmth, whether they walked in wearing a suit or slippers. And behind those changes was the quiet echo of a single encounter. But the true change happened inside people. The young saleswoman, once embarrassed and shamed, now stood as a surprising voice of honesty. She admitted her mistake openly, and in doing so, gave others permission to admit their own. "I was wrong," she would say, "but I don't want to stay wrong." Her words struck a chord. Customers who had once rolled their eyes at car dealerships now left impressed, saying, "Something feels different here." Meanwhile, Manny continued with his usual routine: training, family time, and charity work. He didn't dwell on the incident, but it kept returning to him in unexpected ways. One morning, while jogging, a stranger stopped him. "Senator Pacquiao," the man said, slightly out of breath. "I saw the dealership video. I showed it to my kids. It changed how they treat people at school." "Thank you." Manny smiled gently, bowed his head, and jogged on. To him, that was worth more than any luxury car. Soon, schools, churches, and community leaders began using the story in their own teachings. Teachers would ask their students, "Would you ignore someone just because of their clothes? Remember what happened to Manny Pacquiao." It became more than gossip. It became an example. One evening, the dealership invited Manny and his family back, not to shop, but to speak. The manager introduced him to the gathered employees and guests. "This man showed us that greatness is not in wealth, but in humility. Tonight, he's here not as a customer, but as a teacher." Manny stepped forward, microphone in hand. He looked around at the staff, at the saleswoman who once dismissed him, at the curious guests in the audience. His words were simple. "Fame fades, money fades, but the way you treat people, that lasts. You never know who walks through your doors, but more importantly, you never know what they carry in their hearts. Give them kindness, and you might give them hope." The room erupted in applause. The saleswoman wiped tears from her eyes. By the time Manny and his family left, it was clear. This was no longer just about a dealership. It was about a shift in how people saw respect, not as something to be given based on appearances, but as something owed to every human being. And as Manny walked out into the night air, his daughter tugged at his sleeve. "Papa, today you didn't just teach the dealership a lesson, you taught the world." Manny smiled softly. "Then it was worth it." Friends, if this story touched your heart, let us know where you're watching from in the comments. And don't forget, like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribe so you don't miss tomorrow's inspiring story. Because sometimes one act of humility can change everything.